Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Beekeeping for Newbies. Thank you so very much for taking the time to join us today. I really appreciate that. And as always, feel free to reach out, Jeff at beekeepingfornewbies.com. That's NEWBEES.com. Well, folks, welcome to episode 65. As you already gathered from the title, today's guest was absolutely a pleasure to have on. She was a really, really fun person to talk to. We probably could have talked for hours and hours. Very knowledgeable, a lot of experience in a lot of different areas, and I really, really think you're going to enjoy today's discussion. Now, we're going to break this up into two parts. So if you are an exclusive content subscriber, you're getting the entire episode today from beginning to end, one big long episode, commercial-free and with a higher quality audio bit rate. But for everybody else, it's going to be part one today, and part two will come out on Friday. And this is where I'm going to shut up because I can't really talk about anything without giving anything away or, spoiling any of the content here. So we're just going to go ahead and jump into our discussion. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Tara Chapman. Tara, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, we're very excited to speak with you today. We've got folks in our Discord room online who've been participating and messaging me directly with some things that they're interested in talking about. So we're excited to have you. And I hope the weather's treating you okay. You guys probably didn't see anything with that hurricane that just came by, did you?
No, I'm in Austin, so we're a little inward. We're a little too far inward for that. So thank goodness. Poor Houston just gets beat up though all the time. Poor Houston.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you, if you wouldn't mind just kind of jumping in, just, give us a little bit of, background on you, childhood, anything you think that would be of interest to the listening audience.
Yeah. I've had a few twists and turns throughout life that people tend to enjoy. So I hope that you enjoy hearing about them. So I'm a native Texan. I'm from Texas originally. I'm from a tiny little town in rural West Texas, a town of 400 called Smyre, Texas. And I do not come from a legacy beekeeping family. Right? My granddad wasn't a beekeeper, but he was a cotton farmer, which does make pretty good honey if you're willing to put your bees on dirty cotton. But I don't think I would be. But yeah, he was a cotton farmer. And I ended up going, I was the first in my family to attend college. And I ended up at Duke University, which is about as far on the spectrum as you can get from little old Smyre, Texas, all the way to Duke University, which is in North Carolina. But I mean, I cannot overstate the culture shock that I experienced within the first few days. I mean, we could spend this whole podcast talking about how many times my friends and roommates had to pull me aside and educate me on what you are and aren't allowed to say, and I learned about political correctness and I just didn't even know. I met my first Jewish person at Duke. I'd never met anybody Jewish. So to say I was sheltered is, again, not an exaggeration. So I ended up at Duke, and then I ended up, my first job out of college was with the intelligence community. I worked at the CIA. I was recruited. They came to a career fair at Duke University. They tend to go to all the tier 1 and Ivies, and got my first job. And little sheltered Tara from Duke went all the way to the CIA, and then ended up in Pakistan and Afghanistan and Kuwait and Dubai, and did that I worked in the agency for about 6 years, but I was with the government for over 10 years in various capacities. I spent most of my time focused on Afghanistan and Pakistan. I graduated college in 2003. So we're talking just post 9/11, we're a few years past 9/11 at that point. And that's what all that money was being pushed to the intel community. So that's where I ended up. And I did that for over a decade. And then towards the latter half of that, I was actually splitting my time. I really wanted to return to Texas. I didn't know what or how that looked like, but I convinced, this was before remote work, right before anyone was doing remote work. But I convinced my agency to let me telework from Austin, which was quite a feat at the time. I was very ahead of my time on that one. And so I'd split my time. So I'd spend a week, I'd spend 3 weeks every month in Austin. And then I would spend a week in DC. And then every month, 3 months, 4 months, a few times a year, I would go over to Afghanistan. And I did that for 3 years. And it was during this time that I happened upon a beekeeping class, and that's what brought me to beekeeping.
So you had a beekeeping class in Afghanistan or just during that period of time?
No, just
Okay.
back here. So I've got a great story that. Okay, so no, the beekeeping class was in Austin. So when I was in Austin, for those of you that haven't been to Austin, it's very different from the rest of Texas. To keep Austin weird, and it's a little bit of a different city. There's all kinds of stripes here, and I just wanted to do such cool Austin things when I was here. And there was a Groupon. You remember Groupon? Do you remember
Sure,
that
sure.
website?
Yeah.
I don't know if Groupon still exists, but there was a beekeeping class on Groupon. So I was like, that is so freaking weird. Like, I just remember now I realize, like, it's a form of agriculture, right? It's not so much that it's so Austin, but for me, it felt so Austin because it felt like I was like, people do that. And now it's pretty removed from the world of ag, right? And I thought, people do that? That just sounds so weird and hipster. So I took this beekeeping class and really fell in love with it. But no, the week that I quit my government job, I gave notice. And it's so funny that when I gave notice, I was so nervous. I told everyone in Austin, all my friends here, I'm going to quit my job to be a beekeeper. And I expected them to be super supportive, right, of this weird thing I was doing. And I didn't want to tell any of my people in DC because I thought they're going to think I've lost my marbles, right? Like, I was very nervous to tell them. And the exact opposite happened. Everyone in Austin who saw me, at the time I was working for a special inspector general for Afghanistan reconstruction, and work I was doing was, the topic was congressional hearings. My work was on the front page of the Washington Post multiple times. And they thought, what are you doing giving up this like prestigious, important job? And everyone in DC could not have been more excited for me. I had a woman in the bathroom. She caught me in the bathroom and she like whispered in hushed tones, all I want to do is quit my job and start a cidery and grow an orchard. And I was like, you should do that. Quit your job and start an orchard. So my theory is everyone in DC is just wanting to like run away from DC. Like no one's happy with what they're doing there. But the week that I quit that job, there was a notice. So in Afghanistan, beekeeping is actually considered women's work, believe it or not. It's a job that women hold. And the government of Afghanistan was seeking a consultant to go over and consult the government of Afghanistan and help them educate and build and grow the resources available to women beekeepers. And I thought, if that is not a sign from above that
Yes.
I'm doing the right thing, isn't that just bananas?
That's great.
Because I was working in Afghanistan at the time. That's where I was spending, a third of my time. I wonder if that job's still open.
I know. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, geez, I might have missed an opportunity there. See, I had this vision of you out there working the poppy fields, and I thought, you're no, I'm just here for the beekeeping. I promise,
You know what was so funny was that, in Afghanistan, obviously, like things in Pakistan, both, like the things that I could do versus the things that the men could do, which is a lot of reasons why I left, honestly, very different, right? Because
Sure.
Culturally, women are just seen differently. And I thought, this is the one job that it would have really benefited to be a woman, because it was going to be pretty tricky for them to have consultants come in and work with women, right? That's like looked down upon. Women aren't supposed to be, convening with men outside of their family. I thought, this is the perfect job for a woman beekeeper. So,
I always think about, yeah. And, when I hear that, I think of, it's one of those, everything's okay until it isn't kind of thing, and it's like, oh, they love having you there to do this thing. And then all of a sudden it looks like you're getting elevated. People are following you and listening to you. It's like, okay, we got to cut her down. We got to stop that.
It's really interesting, like being a woman working in Afghanistan, because at the embassy we had, you're very familiar with this. You've got your FSNs, your foreign service nationals that work at the embassy, whether translators or IT guy was Afghan, all that stuff. Actually, the IT guy at the embassy ended up getting his special visa, moving to Austin, and married my best friend, believe it or not.
Wow, that's great.
But, I would work sat next to men at the Kabul embassy every day, and the way that they treated me was very different. I think they just didn't even see me as a woman. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, we've gotten off topic, but it's interesting, talking about that, like how they would treat me versus how they would treat like an Afghan woman was very, very different. They saw me differently than they did Afghan women.
That's such a unique opportunity, though, if you could be able to merge those two things together. Because you mentioned about everybody in the DC area leaving. Because like I was born and raised in the DC area, and I affectionately, jokingly say that I was paroled in 2011 and I'm not going back. But I mean, I just it's so weird because there's so much going on there that if you're in that space and you're doing the thing, like I felt like I was making a difference and I felt like it was an important job. But then you just everything about the area, it just wears you down. And I just got to a point where I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to do something else. And so I completely understand. And I love that, there's a lot of, I don't want to say like entrepreneurial, but like explorative and just kind of creative people that are there that I feel like they just get sucked into a routine and they're not comfortable stepping outside of that comfort zone. Like you said, hey, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going. And there are people that are envious because they just don't have that ability to step outside that comfort zone.
Yeah, that leap is real hard. And what you say about the creativity is so interesting because I remember when I decided I was going to leave and I was kind of like, what am I going to do? I remember feeling like I had this realization that at one point in my life, I was actually quite creative, but there wasn't the space for that in the jobs that I was in. And one of the things that I love most about my life now is that creative space to come up with new products or come up with new events or new offerings or whatever. Like the creativity piece that had been stifled for me for so long is really what I enjoy most.
Yes. And beekeeping provides tremendous opportunity for that. One of the things that I tell people a lot is if you ask 10 different beekeepers, hey, look, what's the best way to do things? You're probably going to get 6 or 7 different answers on some things. You have to find a system that's going to work for you. And it's almost a system for each thing. Like you talk about creativity. Some people just are very much, structured. And it's like, I use a Langstroth 10 frame, boom, 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 boom. And everything is the same. You walk into my apiary, I've got 2 frame nukes, 4 frame nukes, 5 frame nukes. I'm stacking some of them 4 high, some of them 2 high, some of them just a single nuke. Sometimes I'm doing 8 frames. I got crap. Like it's just all over, but it allows you to experiment and try different things and see what works better. And it keeps that creative juice kind of flowing within you,
Yeah. I mean, I'm an educator, right? I teach beekeeping for a living. And it's what I find kind of is a bit of a differentiating factor compared to a lot of other folks, is because so many come to this with, there's one way to do things and this is way I mean, we've all experienced that. We've all experienced when you were a newer beekeeper getting all cap yelled at in a Facebook group or something because people get like wound up of like, this is the way you do things. When really, for very few exceptions, there's a lot of different ways to come to a successful outcome, And so I'm a very open teaching philosophy of like, this is how I do it, but there's other ways that you can do it. And I learn from my students too. Someone might come up with a clever idea. I'm like, I never thought of that before. And so that's the other thing about beekeeping is there's so much, it's also the negative about beekeeping, right? There's so much to learn. But if you're open to it, I tell all my students, like, you basically have to be okay with entering into a lifetime contract of learning. You're never going to learn it all because we still don't know it all about bees. It's not that long ago that we realized that we thought Varroa were feeding on something totally different on the honeybee that we now know. You know what I mean? Like researchers are still learning.
Well, I think back years ago, and when I first started this podcast 4 years ago, I was, I definitely was, advanced beginner, maybe intermediate. I wasn't like a 20-year master beekeeper, but in my mind, I thought because I had a great job, I was making good money, and it was really easy to throw money at a problem and be like, oh, that didn't work out. Boom, just kind of throw some money at it. Well, I just was thinking in my mind, I'm like, I'm a couple years into this and I made a whole lot of mistakes. If nothing else, maybe I can find a way to take some brand new beekeepers and just help them get through that first year or two that I feel like I've finally figured out, like a decade in or whatever it was. But what I found over the years, because I used to teach medics and paramedics years ago, of course, there's teaching in the Army, there's teaching in the intel community, whatever you do, you're for at least for my career, there's been some kind of teaching and education. But what I found is one of the best ways to learn and continue learning is by teaching. And I think it sounds like you're kind of finding that same thing to be true.
Yeah. I think that I also have a style of like self-deprecating humor. I am happy to share all of the stupid things that I have done. And I'm not going to present myself as like this all-knowing. I know a lot. I know more than most beekeepers out there, but it's really fun to hear someone that's kind of in it and is doing it professionally that you look up to, being able to say, oh, do you want to hear the stupid thing that I once did? Maybe if I share I've got this beekeeping book coming out, and it's filled with just stories of stupid things that I've done, and I hope that people enjoy them because there should be something that should come out of all this ridiculousness, that we've all done.
Yeah, and then one thing that I will say as a big kind of like a high five, applause, special thank you to the beekeeping community in general. There have been things that I've thought, well, this is kind of what I'm doing today, and this is what I think works for me. And then I've subsequently come back and amended it and said, hey, I was doing that, and I feel like now this actually might be a better approach. But within the beekeeping community itself, there's a lot of very well-known people. I mean, you've got like Bob Binney, Dave Burns, guys like Randy Oliver, Michael Palmer, Cayman Reynolds. I can just keep going, all these, different people who are, very active and prominent in the beekeeping industry and in the field. Never have I had any of those guys pick up the phone, drop me an email, call me or anything and say, Jeff, you've completely lost your mind. You're an idiot. Why would you say that? And I think that being in a place where, at least to me, I feel like I can really express, hey, this is what I experienced and this is what I saw and this is kind of what I think you should do. And knowing that I'm not going to get beat up. I mean, because there are some places and fields and things where, again, people take that there's only one way to do things mindset. And I haven't seen a lot of that in the bee space myself. I'm
so glad for that for you, because I have unfortunately seen the opposite in a lot of places.
Really?
But with that, yes, for sure. But now Texas is the biggest beekeeping state in the country. So you're going to have a lot more of everything here. Do you know what I mean? But out of that has come some spaces specifically kind of combating that. Like people stating up front, this space is for us to all ask questions. No one's been made to feel stupid the funny thing is that the people that are kind of bringing the negativity are often people that maybe have a lot to learn themselves. The internet's a place where you get all kinds, right?
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that one, because that's where it gets interesting. On the podcast side, I've had some very interesting emails, like face-to-face and doing regular discussions and workshops or other things have been pretty solid. But yeah, I've got a couple of them that I'm definitely not going to share, but some of them where I've been like, I can't believe you just put this in an email. Like, have you lost your mind? And they have like their full name. It's not even like a fake name. It's like a real person that's saying these things.
Yeah. When I started, so I don't know if you're familiar with Bee Weaver, but Danny Weaver is here in Texas, and he was one of the first at the forefront of like, what can we do differently in the world of combating Varroa, right? And he's a geneticist. He's done a lot of like genomes with bees. And has really been working hard on trying to figure out how we go about this, because he was around in the 90s. His family's been in the business since the 1800s. And in the 90s, when everyone was just dumping chemicals, and so many of those chemicals are no longer like viable, So he owns a company called Bee Weaver here in Texas. And they are a breeder and are known all over the country for their queens. And so when I decided to quit my job, mind you, I had 2 hives with a friend. So technically I had 1 hive and my friend had a hive. And we'd had these hives for not even a year. And I thought, I want to quit my job. I want to start a honey company. And so I got my first job with Bee Weaver, and I did this. They were where I'd bought my package of bees the year prior. And at the time, Danny's wife, her name was Laura, and I knew her just because, I'd seen her around and had heard of her. And so I sent her an email, and I just sort of guessed her email address. It's not easy to guess somebody's email address. So I sent her an email, and I said, I really want to come work with y'all for the spring season, because I knew that I had a lot to learn, but I did not realize how much I had to learn. I will say I was quite naive in thinking that I was this great little beekeeper after having 2 hives for 6 months. But I emailed her and I said, are you looking for help for the spring season? And she said, sure, send me your resume and a cover letter. So I have my resume, what's on my resume. I'm like, I've worked for the government my entire career, because I was just about 10 years, out of school by that point. And so And then at the top, I put, my one beekeeping class, and that I built my own top bars and had my little space for my beekeeping experience. And then in my cover letter, I thought, okay, what kind of traits are they looking for? And I thought, well, you need to be strong, right? Like you're shaking packages and making nukes at Bee Weaver, and grafting queens. And so I gave her my Olympic weightlifting numbers. I told her how much I could squat and how much I could deadlift. I remember telling her I've worked with the military for the last 10 years. I never forget, I use the phrase, I'm no shrinking violet, because I want her to know, you see Duke University, you might think of one type of person, but I'm pretty hardy. You can put me out there. And they hired me. And when we got together and we met, she said, Tara, this is really hard work. And if you start the season, you cannot leave early. You must finish, because what had happened is the year prior. So I was 30, mid 30s at this point, 32, 33 maybe. And the year prior, they had hired these two young guys, young 20s, and they didn't make it through the season. And the season's 3-4 months, right? And they quit I don't know, a month or two into the season. And then it really left them in a lurch, right? And so she said, you cannot quit. We had these two guys. And then, of course, for me, it became I'm going to outlast the two guys 10 years younger than me, right? And I remember sharing with her, just so you know, my goal is to start a honey company. I want to be fully transparent with you. And I laugh about it now because I was she might get so nervous that I'm getting in on her territory, this family that's been keeping bees since the 1800s. And then you got this gal that's been keeping bees 6 months, right? It just makes me laugh to think that she'd be threatened by me. But I really wanted to be transparent. That was really important to me. And she said to me, Tara, there's not enough beekeepers in this state to produce enough honey to meet the demand. All boats rise together. And I will never forget that. And that has been really important. I have, here at my business at Two Hives, we have secondhand started a lot of bee businesses. I've trained a lot of students that have gone on to be, sideliners or just have it as a side hustle and beyond. And I've been asked before, does that bother you? I've had lots of employees that have gone on to start their own businesses. I've trained a lot of them. And I believe strongly in what Laura said, that we all rise together and there's a space for all of us here. And I really I follow that, and I tell all my students that as well. I think that's so important for us to work together. We shouldn't be here at each other,
Absolutely. I think that's a great philosophy and a great way to kind of model and run your business and just your life. It's so much, everything is so much happier and more pleasant when everybody is smiling and being nice to each other, and I think she nailed it right. There's plenty of business to go around. And, well, I'll tell you, so you kind of touched on a little bit about your business, Two Hives Honey, and you talked about education and teaching and things. Would you mind telling us how, what's going on there, and anything about the business, how you started, and, how everything, all the things you have going on down there? That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so it was 2014, 2015, and I'd gone and worked for Bee Weaver for the queen rearing season, learned a lot, got stung a lot. Wow, what an experience that is to come out of the gate shaking. Few people will ever get the experience of what it's like to shake packages. There's not a lot of package suppliers out there, right? So that's an intense experience. So came out of that, continued to work for Bee Weaver as a consultant, meaning in Texas, in many states, right, you can get a different valuation on your taxes if you have bees. So I took care of a lot of their clients in the Austin area for them and continued consulting for them. And then really wanted to start this honey company, very naive as to what that meant. But I just started my first 20 hives that past year. So I didn't have any honey. And I thought, how am I going to pay the bills? And so I had this theory. I had folks come to town, friends, they always wanted to get in my beehives. And I thought, I think I could charge for this. And so that's where I first dabbled and dipped my toe into agritourism. Started doing hive tours off my back porch. I'd pull around a cooler of beer. We'd sit on my porch, have some drinks. I'd do a little intro. Then we'd walk across the street because my beehives were across the street in my neighbor's yard. And I would do hive tours. And at that point, it's really funny because I would cold call meetup groups and, had outdoor outdoor meetup groups and the naturalists and all that, and would pitch, bring your group out. And I would, schedule them one by one. I think, now we're in a position where I've got 7 staff that work for me, and we've got our, you could go online right now and book one of many experiences at Two Hives, but it's fun to think about how we first started when it was me doing everything and like scheduling people. I'd take one person out onto a hive tour for $35 in the afternoon. So started doing the agritourism and then started teaching, and then just grew from there. Started about 9 years ago. So started doing that, and then it just continued to grow. Then we got really doing a lot of hive tours, growing the agritourism piece, got our first honey harvest, sold that out. Got a little retail shop because we started doing more teaching, so that we could house a little bit of equipment, our honey, some other fun, like little bee themed products. And then in 2020, so at that point we were doing all of our tours and our agritourism at other sites. I didn't own any land or anything. So like we would do tours at breweries and at a cidery, and we had at a nonprofit farm, and we would just all meet there. And then in 2020, we had outgrown our space in Austin, and we bought a 5.5 acre property just east of the Austin city limits. And it's what we've dubbed the Honey Ranch, and we converted a barn into a classroom and a honey bar. We've got our little retail shop and then a little general store where we sell some equipment. So we, like most beekeepers that do this full time, we dabble in a lot of things, but really what we love most is the education and the agritourism piece. And so we do teach people how to become beekeepers, but a lot of what we're doing is just the bee curious, the intellectually curious, the foodies. They come out and get that, be a beekeeper for a day experience, or they'll do honey sensories, which is like an elevated honey tasting, or honey harvest parties. We've got all sorts of like fun experiences that we've curated, and we do a lot of B2B. So, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Dropboxes, Austin's a big hub in the tech world. And so we bring out a lot of those teams and do a lot of team building activities, a lot of Girl Scout troops. Anyway, that's really where we thrive and we love it the most. And I will tell you, as someone that started out doing just the ag piece, and we definitely still, we have about 350 hives. We're not giant. But we've got a good number of hives that we care for. And the agritourism is exponentially easier for lots of reasons over the actual ag piece. So we're trying to grow that, because both from a staffing perspective, just like I can't run my beekeepers into the ground. You can only keep a beekeeper going for so long. You know what I mean? Like, it just physically is just so demanding. And so we've really found that to be our niche, and what we do best is the education and the experiences.
There's a lot going on there, and a lot of it I could probably go off on. We could probably spend about an hour on this alone, because I'm with you 100%. I'm at a point where I was so pumped up to like leave, the corporate world and go out and do beekeeping full time. And then I get out there and I'm doing it, and I'm like, oh, wow. You remember that back thing from the Army? Remember that foot thing and the knee thing from the Army? I'm like, oh my God. But my back and my body just can't do it. And I started looking at everything kind of the same way you were. I've really enjoyed the education side of things. And I thought, well, my body isn't super great for having like a 500 colony apiary. Maybe it makes more sense to lean, more energy on the other side. But to your point there, I think that, one, it's a lot easier to say, hey, would you be interested in working here, at the register or in the gift shop, or, things that are just like normal people kind of jobs, versus being like, hey, you're going to come out here, you're going to be really, really hot in the summertime, you're going to be sweating your butt off, and you're going to probably make about the same as the people in there, and you might get stung a few times a day. It's a different story, but I think when you look at it from a business standpoint, the margins are probably a lot better inside than they are outside too. So the margins are
so much better. It brings us just so much more joy. I definitely have people, one guy in particular on my staff that he's great with people. He'd just rather not. He'd rather be out with the bees. But yeah, it's easier to hire for. It's easier to retain. I found, beekeeping is so nuanced for all our beginners or wherever you are in your beekeeping journey. If you're 10 years in and you're like, I still just can't figure this out, you should not feel bad, because it is really hard. It's really nuanced. And to be a good beekeeper is it takes a lot of time in hive. That's really hard for a hobbyist to gain. And so I found that I was spending an extraordinary amount of time alongside these folks training them. And then there's no reason they wouldn't just, if they can rub two brain cells together and write an invoice, they can go off and have their own ag clients. You know what I mean? Where they're taking care of people's, that's a big thing in Texas, is the ag valuation. And so I went through quite a few of those folks, you know, and I thought, I just can't keep doing this. I have nothing against them. I just could not keep investing that time and then losing people. And so the amount of time and energy that I can invest to train someone that can go out, put people in a suit, lead them through a 30-minute tour of a hive and teach them, I can do that in a weekend for a hobbyist beekeeper, right? It would take me 6 or 8 months alongside a hobbyist beekeeper to make sure they were at a level to where I could leave them, let them go off and make sure that they were going to be able to manage hives in a way that didn't hurt the business,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I just laugh because I look back to those early days, you know, again, my early days where it's so comical of all the failures and things. I mean, I think it's good if you can laugh at yourself, but the thing that brings me absolute hands down the most joy today, like I still enjoy the bees. I still enjoy going out and having a cup of coffee and just watching them fly in and out in the morning. Like that's still there's a tremendous amount of therapeutic value in that. And I still do really enjoy that. But more than anything, like a great example, there's a listener on the podcast, a member of our Discord room, and he just was talking the other day about this great honey harvest, and I was joking around with him. I was like, oh, wow, that's really weird because I see all those jars of honey, but like I don't see any of them at my house. I thought you were, you know, like I was joking, completely joking. And he's like, oh, no, I'll send you some. And he sends me this big, beautiful jar of honey, and like seeing these folks that like a year or two ago had no idea what they were doing. And now they're producing honey and they're having fun and they're sending me pictures. I got folks like in the UK, there's a gentleman named Dill and his daughter Bella. So cute, you know, cute little girl and her dad, and they're working together in the bee yard because like it just, there's families coming together and just being a piece, just a tiny little piece of that. It's just such a special thing. I think you probably experience the same thing with what you're doing.
It's so great. My two favorite types of people to touch and interact with are your brand newbies, because there's nothing better than when you've got people in a room before that know nothing and you start talking about, like, I mean, bee sex is my favorite topic, like how it all works, or you're in front of a group of Girl Scouts and to tell them like all the girls do all the work, and like to see people's jaws drop at, I mean, one of 1,000 facts that are just super cool and crazy. Nothing beats that. So we get that every day out here when we bring on hive tours and whatnot. And then I love teaching the people that are like invested. Like I love getting the people that are like invested and are like, we are here to learn and take everything you've got because I want to build on my knowledge. And so we have this apprenticeship program, which is one of the first of its kind. There's a lot of out there now, but this is one of the first for beekeeping, where it's 6 full Saturdays and you take the 6 Saturdays with the same 20 people. And the reason that I love that so much, and in fact, it's the only beekeeping class at the ranch that I still teach, my team teaches all the others, is because that one builds and you get everything kind of start to finish. It's the same 20 people. And what would frustrate me is that people would come to like a hive inspection class or a harvesting class, and I could see like, oh, there's so much more gaps in your knowledge, but I just can't fill it in this next 2 hours. And then I would feel inadequate because that person left, and I felt like there's so much more that I need just to get you to a baseline to be successful, you know?
Sure.
So that's why I created this program, because that's what I love, the brand newbies. And then I love getting to spend so many hours with the same group of people and building on that knowledge month by month, and then, you know, letting them go. And it's just my favorite.
That's awesome. I love hearing that, you know, and it's kind of, it's a little bit sad in the same side here. Like I think about like in the Discord room is really great, because what'll happen is someone starts listening to the podcast, they jump in the Discord room, and there's a lot of Q&A going on. And then what happens a lot is I have these cycles of people every season. I can just see it. Like right now, the Discord slows down significantly. Once we hit July, August, things really taper off. Not a lot of chatter going on. Ramps up again kind of right before Christmas time as people are starting to think about beekeeping for next year. And then, of course, we have our big February, March. Everything starts getting, you know, much more active. But what I have is typically there's like a group of about 10 to 20 that come in. They're really active. they have that great first season of beekeeping and things are going well for them. Then I never hear from them again. I'm like, hey, what happened? You can still come back and talk to us. They come in, they learn, and they move on. And it's like, well, my little birds left the nest, but it's still fun and rewarding.
And you just hope that it's because they've outgrown you and not the opposite, right?
Well, I always fear that they're like...
It could be the opposite, right? It could be the opposite. Like I was like in one of the Texas-based Facebook groups this week, and this guy, he just posted, my bees are gone, I'm devastated. And then he posted like 4 more times that day. And you can see it like kind of unfolding as he starts to realize that his bees absconded. And then he comes back and he posted, wait, the bees are back. Well, of course, the colonies are being robbed, right? And then we had to break it to him like, no, your bees didn't come back. And then the next day, the emotions continued. And so hopefully there are little birds that are leaving the nest and they've been successful and they're going on. And it's not one of the many people that just don't make it after a year or two. And I get it. I get why.
Well, and I think sometimes there's this thing that's just inherent to people sometimes to say like, I wonder if they went off and they learned a whole lot and realized that I'm full of crap and they don't even want to listen to me anymore. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe they're like, yeah, it took me about 2 years to break all the bad habits I learned from Jeff, but after that I was fine. I'm not sure. I say a lot that it ends up being like you probably remember like back from like, I think, I don't know, like mid 80s, late 80s, something like that. But you had that sportscaster guy, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. Like that's beekeeping. Like there can be some emotional roller coasters with the hobby and the craft.
It's brutal. Yeah. I mean, I tell this story in the book that one of my very first beekeeping students, her name was Diane. And I had to sit her down and say, Diane, I don't know if this hobby is good for you. She would just get so emotionally tied, and I understand it, but you also have to, kind of certainly what comes with agriculture, right? And nature is cruel. And sure, maybe there's some things that like we could have done better, but there's just so many things you also can't control. And so I had to sit her down and say, Diane, if we can't get this under control, I worry you need to stop beekeeping because it was just tormenting her,
know? Oh, wow. Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and take a break right here. So this will be the end of episode 65, part 1. We will continue with episode 66, which will be the part 2 with our interview with Tara Chapman. And that's all I've got for you right now. So take care, be kind to one another, and remember that I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. We'll talk to you soon.